Welcome to the Legacy Cultivators podcast, the podcast where visionary changemakers share how they're building well-resourced legacies fueled by purpose, alignment, and communal care. Through these conversations, we explore the sacred dance of regenerative ecosystems, where remembrance, holistic entrepreneurship, creativity, and wealth converge. Because true legacy lives in the path that we walk together, a sacred act of weaving memory, resources, and the wisdoms that bring us home. I'm your host, Love Soleil. Now let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Legacy Cultivators podcast. Today we have Nina with us. I'm so excited that you're here, Nina. Let me share a little bit about you. She's incredible powerhouse. Y'all are in for a treat. Okay. She's a multi-passionate entrepreneur, and her work really lies in the intersections of art, storytelling, and business. Her work is really imagining the creative economy through investment in capital and so much more. She has worked across a lot of industries, and I'm very excited to hear about it, for y'all to hear about it, and how it all ties into her work. So, Nina, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much.
Woo! Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm so excited to have our conversation and, have a lot of laughs, a little bit of insight, and of course, sprinkles of culture, since that's what I do best. I think so, anyway.
You and we are the Cultural Preservation Network, so it only makes sense. So to really ground into the moment, into the space, can you share with us a word or a phrase that really describes how you're feeling in this moment in your mind, body, and spirit?
I always anchor myself in one word in particular, and it's something I think everyone needs to continue to either build up or maintain, and it's integrity. I think a lot of times we kind of see people in either positions that are more elevated than where we currently are. And sometimes we think to ourselves when things especially get hard or difficult and challenging of just, oh man, maybe I do have to concede a little bit or make a concession here and there of what I need to do to get to where I need to go. But we were just talking like ahead of this recording of just like how I had an exciting moment over the weekend and it was anchored in like authenticity and most importantly integrity and doing the right thing and making sure that I honor myself, my culture, and overall legacy of expanded storytelling and making sure that people don't get left behind. So I would actually just describe myself with that one word. And yeah, I would say that. That's a pretty good one. If I don't have anything else, I have my integrity at the very least.
The most important thing, because the integrity will take you so far. So I love that. And like I said, you are such a powerhouse. Just talking to you, I have learned so much already. And so if you can kind of share with us, you do so much incredible things. So if you can walk us through, your personal and professional journeys. You've worked across politics, finance, retail, art, and more, and really tell us how that led you to the multi-layered work that you're doing now.
Yeah. So first, I always want to also say to everyone, like, no matter what your circumstances look like, just honor what you love and do what you love. And everything else will just fall into place. That's kind of how I've lived my life, even from since I was a tot, to be honest. And I don't really come from this like trust fund or like super wealthy family because I know we are so used to hearing that too from that group. But I really want to emphasize this point of when you do what you love, everything works out in your favor. For any alchemist fans out there, it's like the universe is truly conspiring in your favor. And so as a child, I was always very creative and I followed that passion. I really enjoyed it and I loved school. So that kind of just like I always love learning. I love studying and you find out that the blueprint of what makes you you and like what you're probably, I'm assuming for myself and for many others out there, what you end up being known for lies in the things you love. And that just, it's so easy to miss too because it's so obvious. It's like breathing to you. You don't think about it. but that's the type of love I'm talking about. Something you love so much, you don't even think about it, you just do. So for me, that was always like a constant of creativity and learning. And so when I enter the professional realm, I wanted to apply that in like my government work because I also love to like helping people and advocacy. And so I ended up working for New York State government just on like healthcare policy and a couple other different hats because in government you wear a few, and I'm always happy to because public service is incredibly important. And from there, I realized, oh my God, like I need to expand my learning because we were working through the COVID-19 pandemic. And it was in my experience there that I learned, well, this is a very trying time. And even governments, when they're trying to help people, get kind of strained if certain entities don't follow through, such as the federal government at the time, to provide assistance to New Yorkers. So I just kind of vividly remember being really upset at the decisions we had to make to just continue to do what we thought was right. And that meant like some temporary cuts. We didn't know at the time that they would eventually restore it, but having to make those cuts. And it really sits with you of like, hmm, unless you're faced with, well, what do I cut? Do you cut from children's health care? Do you cut from another essential service or program? And that just didn't really sit right with me as someone who entered the space wanting to do good, wanting to see people do better than they ever thought they could achieve just by the assistance of government. So that's what kind of inspired me to pivot into the finance industry because I was like, I need more tools in my toolbox. So I leave Albany, which is where the capital is, and I move to New York City. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get a finance job. I don't believe in limiting yourself. I don't believe really in telling yourself no. Just let like God, the universe, source, whoever you subscribe to, tell you no. Um, you owe it to yourself to like be surprised at the very least. And if you tried and it didn't pan out, well, at least you tried. It's better than like being like, what if, in my opinion. So I ended up pivoting into finance and like that's when I really got nitty-gritty with my technical skill and learning what's available to me to figure out ultimately how do I converge all of my interests now? Because I'll admittedly, I wasn't in love with what I was doing, but I love the skills I gained. And by doing that, I was able to kind of sit after kind of being a little burnt out from that role of just let's get back to basics, right? Yeah, let's get back to like what makes me happy? What do I love to do that is so damn easy? It's like breathing. I was like, well, I love creativity. I love arts and culture. I love advocacy work. And I admitted I do like the actual skill, like the financial skills. I find it to be fascinating. It's another way of storytelling in a different format. So it is cool to be able to convey a story through the numbers. And so I thought, well, with this knowledge, I'm going to morph it all together. And I have one life. So again, I'm not telling myself no. I'm letting the universe kind of tell me no. And if they tell me no, I'll stop. But they got to tell me no at least 3 times. That's my next thing. I'm like, nah, you gotta, don't take, if it's 3 times, like, all right, pack it up. But if it's once, like, fuck up is what I say. It's like, it got hard. No, 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 keep going. But I was like, you know what? I want to help creatives. I want to make sure that you can do what you love and not have it be an aside to your 9 to 5. You can actually create a beautiful life for yourself by following your passions and your curiosities. So I left the firm and I started two things, Orm Muse Collective and the Agora Fund. And Orm Muse Collective is more of like a creative business school and an art gallery where I get to actually showcase and support and platform emerging artists while also honoring the advocacy work of what's happening with the federal government and saying, this is not okay. And we're going to tell you it's not okay through our artistic prowess. On the other end, you have the Agora Fund, which is more of the investment fund for creatives for like film, fashion, and art projects in disciplines. And that's more of me recognizing that at the end of the day, the money and the finances do move the needle significantly. And I always want to honor the fact that creativity has given us so many incredible things that make our lives easier, make life worth living. Um, and in my experience of dealing in the financial sector and seeing like specifically tech founders, you kind of just see like, oh, well, they get millions of dollars. And when you look under the hood a little bit, it's not because they're honestly maybe the best or the smartest or like any other adjective you want to throw in there. It's really because they were bold enough to do it. They had a vision, and then they pitched that vision to someone who said, okay, here's X amount, go execute the vision. And now you see a lot of these platforms, a lot of these apps come to life. And I was like, well, creatives have vision and they have crazy work ethic. And, it's easy to think that when someone secures millions of dollars in funding, that, maybe like maybe they are smarter or better than me, and maybe they have more of a business background. But I'll be pretty candid and say that's, to be honest, not always the case. Again, it's just the boldness of trying. And they get taught that from their connections once they secure investment or just by like really grinding the pavement. And we talk about it a lot with creatives of just, oh, they're so artistic, they're so tapped in that way, but then there's a little bit of a stumble with the business aspect. And like I was kind of just like I said, I'm like another industry, they don't really have a strong sense of that either, but they get taught that. And I'm like, I'm going to apply the same thing here. I think if you teach someone the necessary business skills and understandings, they will do well. I think it's incredible that someone can pull something that was in their head into reality. It's like a superpower, in my opinion, and that should be supported because if it wasn't for the creativity, if it wasn't for the arts and culture space, I wouldn't even be here today. So you never know, like, who you're inspiring and who, like, the domino effect of what your work will do and the legacy you leave behind because of said work.
Absolutely. And I really love how you shared that because that's the thing about it. Like, people think that, like, if you're creative, you just have to stick to art and not have this kind of like, oh, you can't teach creatives business. Oh, they're not going to integrate that. There's been so much of that kind of weird programming of this or that. And
Mhm.
so I really appreciate what you're doing. And that's what also made me like, oh, we have to get her on because it's so important for this to be in a holistic way. I mean, even me, like I resonate really deeply with like, yo, when it comes to industries, I don't have to box myself in. I can go do my work because my mission and my vision is not tied to an industry. It's literally whatever tools and resources spirit is going to lead me and weave me into those places. So I was like, oh, we like I just felt that very deeply. And in the sense of like, okay, like what is really important is that we integrate art and creativity with the capital, with the investments and figuring out how to really have that so that our art is sustainable and our art can continue to keep growing and going and touch and reach more people even when we're no longer here. And it's important for us to have that kind of background. So I really love what you're doing with that. And I'm curious because I know a lot of like creatives, they have no like insight into like, okay, how do I get, the investors? How do people even think about investing in arts? And in a way that really honors the value of the art. So I would love to one hear you talk about like from that back end, since you kind of know it, of like what are really investors kind of looking for when it comes to investing in art?
Mhm.
And then on the other side of that, how can creatives really, approach funding and pitching in a way that is effective and also attracts their aligned investors? So we'll split that up.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so to answer your first question on, um, I guess what investors are kind of looking for in terms of when we're stepping into the creative arena, I always love to highlight that I kind of talk about the Agora Fund similar to the Renaissance period. And just a quick, because I am a history buff, just a quick refresher of like the Renaissance period was from the 1400s all the way up until almost the 1800s. So we're talking about a huge time span. And we typically, historically, will default to the Italian Renaissance, right? And you have just these like titans, Michelangelo, Raphael, the like. And you think about their artwork, but it's not even just anchored solely in their artwork. It's the fact that these creative geniuses have also contributed in other ways um, through technological advancement and also health innovation for the time period. Remember, so there and architectural like advancements, all these amazing things. Um, and from that time period, you have like well, I would say like modern society. A lot of it, the things we enjoy now, are callbacks to that time in history. And you're wondering like, well, how did this come to life? Like, how did someone have all this time to like paint the Sistine Chapel and sculpt this artwork and draft up these new weapons for a war that was happening in that time period. Um, and it's because of the Medici family and because they decided, let me sponsor these artists. And for them, this was an investment of multiple, for multiple reasons. It was a very strategic investment in terms of not only do you have influence in the art space of like, let's be honest, we all do better in a more beautiful environment, but also to document the times, but also to like expand their influence through different channels of that time period, through like healthcare, through warfare, even because even when I mention warfare, some people get a little and it's actually through war where you get the spread of diversity, culture, and new technologies. So for every reminder, for every like not so great event, you get 10 beautiful things out of it. And I think we're in that moment now of a second coming of a renaissance of you look around, you see that things are not great, to put it very lightly. You kind of see the world kind of crumbling around you. And you know, I wrote once one time that, you know, I always thought I would be building upon the infrastructure that those before me have laid out, all of the ancestors before us, their hard work, their blood, sweat, and tears. And it's just been burned to the ground, in my opinion. And so, what do? We just rise from the ashes and build upon it and build anew. And now we have the beauty of having the knowledge of what worked and what didn't. So, we get to set the tone in a very different, exciting way. So that leads me back to, well, Nina, like, what do these investors look for? That was a great story, but get to the point. I got you. Don't worry, I didn't forget. You know, that's how I roll. Lock in, get a coffee for this podcast. So it leads me to, well, what are investors looking for? What are they thinking about? So for specifically my visual artists, painters, and sculptors, I want you guys to like think about it in this context of investors will think about creativity, number one, in my opinion, from a do I even like it, which is incredibly subjective, but it is a factor of like, do I like it? And I would say a lot of investors from a cultural creative standpoint invest a little bit or primarily for the love of the game. If you look at a UBS art report, um, they actually ask like or dictate what the number one drivers are or the top three drivers of why someone buys artwork. And the number one for many, many years, number one driver is because they love it. They genuinely love the work. The second one is the financial benefit of return on investment. And I always look at the second one as like, it's a nice to have. It's like a win-win. Like you acquired this because you loved it. And it just so happens that you have a financial gain from it. So it's like, oh, that wasn't the main driver, but it's nice. So investors typically look at, is this culturally resonant with the mass audiences? Does it resonate with them? And then for the film folks, for the fashion folks, does it resonate with bigger audiences of the masses? Um, and for visual artists, want you guys to kind of also think about like to get really, really firm in your storytelling. Like I know creatives are the masters at this, right? And you guys do it so well through your respective mediums. But if you even listen back to this podcast, you'll notice how telling this story of like how I kind of weaved you or drew you in, excuse me, into like how I kind of got started. And then we go down this like little windy path, and you're like, well, is she going to say it? Is she going to say it? And then I somehow weave it back to what I said in the beginning. And you're like, oh, dang, she's good. That's what we're looking for. And that is essentially what we're looking for. It's great that you have this work. It does a great job telling what you want it to convey. But what really solidifies it and drives it home is when you're in front of someone and you're confidently and saying it with so much conviction of this is who I am, this is why I create, and this is the most important part, in my opinion, of this is why you should care. I think back a lot about journalism, like journalism 101. The professor or your teacher will typically say, like you have to answer the who, what, where, when, and why, and sometimes how. But those first couple of questions of like who, what, where, when, and why, I should know very quickly. It doesn't have to be in the first opener, but generally, like I should be able to answer those questions when you're telling me like what you do, why you do it, and why it's important, and why I should care, or why should anyone care, right? And so I would say from that point, I want you to practice with somebody. I want you to write this out. I know writing kind of, as a writer myself, it does kind of suck sometimes, but it's really important to like get you to organize your thoughts. And then you can actually see the progression of your process. It's similar to like creating anything else, right? You can see the progression, you can see where you need to tweak. And it's nice when you look back and you see how far you how much you've grown through your career and how exceptional you've become at storytelling, whatever the topic is. So that's the big one of storytell, right? And say it confidently. Do you know how many times I've been in rooms with people that may not actually know what they're talking about? Myself included, sometimes I'll admit I may not know what I'm talking about sometimes in a room in the past, but I'm like, I'm just going to talk and speak very, very confidently. I for lack of a better phrase, and it's so true, I just navigate the world like the most mediocre white guy you've ever come across. You know the type, right? It's like, you go into work or your job, you do what you need to do, and then there's this guy. It's like you would think, did you even like what's happening upstairs? It's like two brain cells, right? But he's just so charismatic. He's so like He's like, "Nope, this is what it is. This is what we're doing. We're gonna do this." And you watch how the room just responds to that, just because he said it with so much confidence and so much conviction. That's what you need to have. It's time. And again, don't limit yourself, but don't get arrogant. It's a delicate balance there, but you'll learn it through time. So I just realized this is a very long response, but I want to like capture why to get to another key point of like what investors are looking for. And I've talked to so many creatives about this point, and it generates the same response. But the point is, I need y'all to know your numbers. And you don't need to understand like how to financially model something or forecast something. You don't have to be an expert, but you do need to understand your storytelling in this format. You can understand the what the scientific folks and researchers, the qualitative aspect of this is why I do what I do. This is why I love to do this. This is why I chose this medium. This is why it's significant. But you need to be able to really to boost the confidence, explain your numbers and why, and tell me the story of what that is. And for instance, there's one artist I think of in particular where they we had a great conversation, amazing talent. And it's like I had no doubt that they will do well, but the thing that actually dings them up is they couldn't tell me why for the financials. So they told me because I had spoken to so many people, like, what's the biggest problem? And the finances are always the big problems. Why I like created the Agora fund So my Muse Collective is like the school that like teaches you how to build those streams of revenue to make sure you're fine, that you don't have to allocate mental space to how am I going to pay rent? How am I going to buy groceries? Like it teaches you how to fish as opposed to giving you the fish. And the Agora Fund is for those who already know how to fish and finally need the fish because they need to learn how to nurture the fish to be a bigger one, the biggest in the pond. So what do I mean by the numbers? And this guy, I asked him, I was like, so if you need someone to invest in you, what's your number? He didn't know what the number was. If you need investment, you need to know exactly what the number is. You need to defend that number. What are you basing the number off of? Why? What's going into that number? Is it being spent on your rent or like what we'd say operational costs? Is it going towards strictly your business? You have to defend and be able to answer those questions of what is your number? How much, what does the financial landscape kind of look like of like, what's your debt look like? Get comfortable with it because yes, wealthy people use it too. That is true. It's not a bad thing. It's a tool. You just need to understand the tool and use it responsibly so you don't hurt yourself. It's like understanding the lab safety rules before you go into a scientific lab. Because if you don't know the rules, you will hurt yourself. So also, I tell everyone this too, in your respective industries, just like understand your marketscape. For the visual art folks, go on ArtNet, go on Art News, understand, just read a couple articles, one or two every day to get a sense of like the art market. Because when you're asking for investment, my brain is going to go to what is the market doing? Is this like financially sound? I'm going to hear your story and then I'm going to like start going through my little checklist of like, well, I know what the art market is doing, what work is kind of shifting it in a positive direction, or what event is driving it in a negative direction that would make me less inclined to want to acquire it or invest in it. Because there is a subjective nature, but you should like kind of get a temp check of like understanding the market so you understand consumer behavior. So you can prepare yourself of like, okay, so if the market is moving in a direction we don't like, I know, and I can kind of see it. I know what I need to do if it means I have to lean more on merch, if I have to lean more on licensing, other avenues while I wait for the market to kind of have the appetite and loosen their purse strings to start acquiring work again. So that's why I'm like, for my film folks, like I go on Hollywood Reporter every morning. Like I spend, me personally, because I'm covering so much ground, I do spend like sometimes 2 hours in the morning because I wake up early, just kind of combing through what's happening in your industries of like, what's happening? Why is no one making projects in California? Dig a little deeper as to why. It's probably because it's becoming a little too expensive to film there. What's a cheaper alternative? And that's how you should start to think about it. And for my fashion folks, unfortunately, we're in a crazy time where goodness gracious, starting out your own brand is a very expensive task in good economic times. But now you have to get really creative of like, okay, we're in a very perilous time that even the heritage houses are not. They're trying to navigate this as well. So I would monitor what's happening with like I would subscribe to Business of Fashion, to be honest, for my fashion people. Like you should be tapped in and reading like what's happening of where you want to go. So like let's pick Hermes. Read about Hermes, understand their history, and see how they're responding to what's happening in the environment. Right. That's what I do. I follow them. So it's like understanding that scape. So to recap, because I know that was a little verbose, you should be able to tell me your story very confidently and with conviction in a qualitative sense. But you should also be able to tell me the story financially. You should know your numbers. You don't have to be an expert in accounting. You just need to know why you picked those numbers, defend the numbers, and be able to like talk through a couple of follow-up questions from an investor, like how did you get there? What is this number going to be used for? And if you're really, really good, you should be able to tell that investor like ballpark how they would get their money back, or like think about it through that lens. Because I've told many people, think a little bit like an investor, you'll get a little farther, or not even a little, much farther. Trust me. Because now you're thinking about the benefit from someone else. I like to think of a place of abundance, because you're just thinking about future you when you have that stability. Now you're going to be thinking, oh, what am I going to look for? Who else am I going to support now that I've made it? So that leads us to, what are creatives like? What's available to you in terms of making sure you continue on your journey by any means necessary and financially solvent? And then at Muse Collective, we kind of go into that more robustly in terms of like curriculum, of me just kind of selecting case studies that are out of the framework of the metas, it's X, but I'd like to call it Twitter, the Twitters, um, those huge like corporations. I actually select on purpose all the creatives who have done it, and they've done it with intention, and they've scaled beautifully. And so I've selected like Solange St. Huron. I've selected Issa Rae's like radio. Just so many different examples. Hailing Naaman on Substack. Every creative discipline you can think of, I've selected a case study for us to take a look at and see how they did this, what they needed to do. And generally speaking, I want everyone to kind of think about, well, think a little bit more, less like a freelancer and think like a founder. That mindset shift will do wonders. If your mind ain't right, well, good luck, Charlie, because it'll be hard to navigate the other things. So I like to think of freelancers, while I respect what they do, it's just more of like, you're kind of always in this like weird fear. And like you're kind of like on edge, like, oh my God, I'm jumping from project to project. And if somebody kind of doesn't pull through, you feel it. When you think like a founder, you're kind of thinking more big picture and strategically. I have these things I need to do, and every move and decision I make is a strategic one. And it puts you in a different mental state of, I am the boss, I'm in charge of my career, I'm in charge of my reality. And when you think like that, because creatives don't think like this, but you should. You are a company, you are a business. This is your baby. You are mother. Like you like this is, you are building something out of, again, from just a vision and for your mental state and pulling it into reality. It deserves someone who like recognizes that and is going to take charge of it and ownership of it. And by doing that, and in order to do that, you have to think like a founder. So founders will also think about, well, what am I going to do to sustain myself? Some of them to pick up, they won't say this uh, as much as I would like them to, but to be transparent, it's like thinking like a founder is identifying things will go wrong, and that's okay. I like to look at it as moments and opportunities to show how excellent you are at problem solving. They never stop. I'll be honest. The problems never cease. They just evolve over time because you get better over time. So the challenges are they're going to turn up the dial a bit. I think it's a good thing. You want to be like really, really good at what you do, great at what you do. And every time you solve it, you're kind of like, pat yourself on the back. Ha. You celebrate it and you keep moving forward. So since finances are the big constraint, I want you to kind of think like a founder of like, oh my God, my company is having a crunch period. What am I going to do? And one avenue, because you are already an expert at what you do, people will pay for consulting services. So instead of maybe thinking about like a price by hour, price by project primarily from a freelancing mindset, I want you guys to shift more towards a retainer for many reasons. You're an expert at what you do. Like I said, you have knowledge. People want to pick your brain. You should honestly charge them to pick your brain. You have great ideas. Don't undersell yourself. There's a reason they're coming to you to tap into it. And people will pay money for other things that I don't think are very significant, but your knowledge is. You should be compensated for it. And when you have a retainer, so let's say X amount of dollars a month, in some cases, I've seen on the low end, $600 a month. On the high end, I've seen 20 grand and up, depending on the industry and whatnot. So having a retainer gives you that stability, so you don't have to worry. And I like to personally, I like to embed a minimum in my like contracts of like, okay, like let's say we do like a lower retainer in the beginning just to make sure it's a good fit and you like it. If you like it, it's at least like 3 months. So you give yourself the runway of like one financial quarter to just be able to like pay your bills, get your necessities out of the way, and you still are now focused on creating, doing what you need to do, and finding new ways to surprise yourself through that endeavor. So think of like retainers, also think of licensing. You have created this work, you can essentially like kind of, for lack of a better phrase, rent it out. I'm throwing quotes for anyone who's just listening. Rent it out um, to brands because they're good at building one product. They need a genius to help sell it and give a visual aesthetic to it. That's where you come in. You already created the aesthetic. You can enter in a licensing agreement of sorts to have, again, stable income. And when you think of like the rates for that, always consider the value add. So, yes, you have this beautiful work and visual work that you're contributing, but is this visual work helping expand their brand awareness on a global scale, on a national scale? And when you ask yourself those questions, inflate the price. Inflate the price. You are a value add. You are contributing to the growth of that brand presence. People will pay if they don't. There, everyone says no. Okay, I used to negotiate for like government for a living. I'm like, everyone says no on the first go. That's why I said, remember, don't. If life tells you no, don't take that. Everyone says no on the first go. That's why I said wait 3 times, and then if 3 times happens, babe, redirect to something else. Okay? You learned what you needed to learn in this pursuit. It's now it's time to go find something else, but you know, increase your rates, increase your prices. So again, retainers, thinking like a founder and licensing. Um, and of course you can enter into brand partnerships, but that's a separate beast. But I wanted to note that because it is an option on the table. And I think I'm forgetting one more thing. Oh, right. Make sure you create a digital product so you don't have to actively be on all the time. You can just like be asleep, go do something, and you still have another form of income. And when you get to the stable part, call me. Then there's the investment stuff. That what I like to say a little bit more advanced stuff because you need to get really strong in your foundations before you add in some more complex topics that if you don't if you're not in a stable juncture, it's kind of going to be a little wonky. So call me when you get to the stable point. Then we can start beefing it up to make sure you can grow it and then really not have to think about it. You can be stable and have one house and then have another house elsewhere, maybe in the vineyard or out east in the Hamptons.
Oh my goodness, that was honestly a masterclass. So thank you for sharing that. Like literally a masterclass. And honestly, I think the really important thing that you mentioned that like for me was what clicked and really changed my trajectory as an artist too was that like we're so used to the freelance hustle where like if you're not literally sitting there, for example, me as a filmmaker, if I'm not on set for 12 hours doing the work, I'm not getting paid. And
Mm,
how sustainable is that? Like you have a cap on your growth and how much you can make. If you're sitting there where it's like, okay, I can only make money when I'm literally working these long hours. And as artists, it's typically long hours. And so shifting that mindset from like, okay, like this is kind of like a freelance side hustle thing to like, okay, I'm a founder, I'm an entrepreneur, and what you have to like think of differently when you're going into that place. And like, I really love the models of like, okay, we don't have to just think of it linearly. Like, okay, I make this one piece of art, I sell this one piece of art, I have enough money for my rent for 2 months. And then
Mm,
you gotta keep, it's like a cycle that never ends, that you eventually get burnt out, because a lot of the times with creativity, it's like I want to be inspired. And if I'm like always just hustling to get the
mhm,
piece out to be able to pay my rent, your margins are very thin too. So that is very huge. And just to kind of share on my end, I think what you said, particularly about the licensing, like if you're a photographer, if you're a filmmaker, artist, whatever, I'm like, okay, I take this picture,
mhm,
I can, sell it in a gallery, but I can also like, I work with Adobe Stock, and I'll sit there and I will also like, every time someone uses my photos, then like I get paid passively. And
mhm.
so anytime I want to ramp that up, I just go out for a day, take pictures, run it back. And it's like, it's simple. It's just in the background. So really thinking about, where you're leaving money on the table, you got to squeeze it, squeeze the juice.
Yeah, you put so much love into that work, let it love you back. Be open to receiving. You put so much time, so much effort, like, let it love you back, guys. There's multiple ways. There's multiple love languages. It could love you back. So, that's why I definitely had to highlight it. I also really quickly, I just wanna say, um, I I shared with you, like, before we recorded today when we were just, like, kind of catching up, getting to know one another, and I I mentioned how I actually used to live on the Upper East Side here in Manhattan when I was working finance, guys. I don't live there anymore, but it was nice, and what my biggest takeaway, 'cause I live like, basically on Park Ave, and when you're in that environment, you see and you interact with the residents there, it's easy to think, yeah, everybody might be working finance, right? Or maybe there's some financial professionals and doctors. But something fascinating I noticed when I lived there is, there's a lot of artists and creatives that live there. And they're the reason why I'm like, I have a very expanded vision. And they did not inherit that wealth. And some of them didn't actually marry into it. Their spouse was the one that married into the like, and they were able to create this amazing life for themselves because they thought more like a founder. And now they live in Park Avenue and they're like retired and they're very lovely people, incredible creatives, um, very inspirational. So you can have that life. You just have to switch the mindset first and meeting those my former neighbors and honestly, some of them are like close friends where they literally just create with their hands and they just were able to create Eden for themselves. Is that can easily be you. Now that I've said it, I'm like, take this as a sign, everyone. It is possible. So when you build the infrastructure for yourself, the financial infrastructure, I will see you on Park Avenue.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, this is honestly so special. And, as you being someone who has your ear to the creative pulse, studying every day, feeling into what is going on in the creative and art industries, what do you feel like is missing in the creative industry that really would lead to more economic empowerment for underrepresented artists?
Where do I begin? But I think the first thing that always comes to mind, and it's why I got started in this space and on my ventures, is the creative industries are really, really exceptional at telling one narrative. However, they don't do a great job expanding, they just don't take the blinders off. There's multiple narratives, there's many different stories, there's multiple different things that resonate with various groups. And I mean, we've all read and heard other people talk about the fact of like who's in the room matters of those decisions that are being made of like what project gets greenlit and what which ones don't. And at the end of the day, across all the industries, I'll say like they need the diversity. I'll say it. It's a scandalous word to say now, but and it's only trendy if things are good and then they want to do that. But I think it's a major. I think all the execs need to really sit with themselves and get over their initial reaction of, what is this woke propaganda? Like, give me a break. Do you want to be great at what you do? Do you want to be a cultural architect, an archivist, someone who preserves what is creatively sound and resonant with the cultural zeitgeist? Then you need to expand what's possible and what's honestly been here for a very long time. You've just turned a blind eye for whatever reason. Creative industries in film and fashion and even in the art world, they love uh, those who are not white, but for to like enjoy what they create, but they don't love supporting them. And you're leaving a lot on the table there. I actually recently, and I have a newsletter called Creativity Meets Capital, where I actually do like provide funding sources, but I also talk about important topical matters. And the most recent one was the White House's advancement of sanitizing narratives and censorship through publishing an online list about what's acceptable artwork that's the Smithsonian should be debuting. And a lot of it is anchored in BIPOC artwork or policies that are more inclusive. And I can go on and on of why this is wrong culturally and why we shouldn't be going down this road. And historically, because it's very it rhymes with another period in 1930s Germany, where the Nazis actually had an art exhibition called Degenerate Art, where they said that like Jewish art is not. Yeah, little history lesson for everyone. I'm like, it's they had an art exhibition talking about what's acceptable art, and that Jewish art was basically not included in that fold. And if you want to read more about it, hit up Creativity Meets Capital. I go into a lot more detail there about the history of what happened there and how it really mirrors what's happening right now and what you can do moving forward to try and combat that by donating to your cultural institutions, supporting these artists and their work because you can't rely on government right now to do that. So I bring all this up to say, like in that Substack post or my newsletter, I actually also talk about the economic impact of what happens when you don't acknowledge these stories. And it can have potentially very devastating impacts on your investments because I know, remember, money does dictate a lot of decisions, and I acknowledge that. And it's a tool, it's not a weapon, it's a tool, and it can be used for your advantage as well. That's why I keep saying in the advice, it's like you need to know your numbers and be able to speak to what's happening in the markets because that'll give someone confidence and gives you the knowledge to advocate for yourself and know your worth. So when you don't invest in these cultural narratives, you run into a problem where you have this one type of narrative that's the only, for lack of a better phrase, I'm going to turn into more of an investor of like the language I'm about to use, but you only have one product on the market. And that can have devastating impacts. So if this is the only thing that's valued, like that can mess with their valuation, but also like it puts the market in this weird precarious spot of anyone who's invested in these narratives. Now it's in this weird downturn. But I'll just sum it up of like by not investing in cultural narratives, you kind of run into this space of like leaving money on the table, and leaving opportunities on the table. And like I said throughout earlier in this interview of just when we don't invest in creativity, we don't know how to tap into that domino effect of like, what if you don't fund that project? I never see it. And then I don't create something that helps tens or maybe thousands or hundreds, whatever the number is. I think if I inspire one person, I've done my job well. But you never know who you're inspiring, what can be built upon that. And I think Hollywood execs and I think other execs in their respective disciplines in the creative world really need to recognize truly to get over the woke propaganda they like to spew out for those that don't like to invest in it or it's too risky. You guys operate in the world of risk. If you wanted something stable, honestly, go into the traditional financial sector. But we both know that's not why you do what you do. So, like, You want creativity, you want the cool factor, and you want to be the one to say that you coined it. So it's time that we stop just appreciating the product that multiple groups put out and start supporting these groups. Because if you like the product, I assure you, if you actually support these cultures, you will get tens, thousands more of them. And frankly, you'll get a greater return on your investment. And you probably wouldn't be getting beaten up every 5 seconds on the internet because you guys are culturally incompetent. I'll say it. No one's going to reward cultural incompetence, but the narratives will show you online and even in real life that when you support communities, they will love you back. Like how, as a founder, you create this work, you created this work, and the work will love you back when you give it the opportunity to. To my executives and across the disciplines, when you appreciate the community and you get over your pride, they will love you back. You will be surprised and you'll personally grow from it. We love that over here. So,
Yes, and I really think that's why it's important too of like this piece that I had asked in the previous question about like aligned investors because I if people don't have this kind of like knowing naturally of why it's so important, the cultural work that is being done and how it shifts and moves worlds literally is kind of like, are you really the investor for me? And then like
mm,
we had talked about when we not on this, but when we spoke the first time, you had a method of, okay, I'm gonna have them all come to me and I'm gonna weed out who I really want to work with because no one wants the pain. And I've been there from getting film grants, and it is not worth it when you have to deal with funders that just don't get it to the
mm.
point where they sabotage your work. And then it's like I was better off like just figuring it out on my own. So maybe you can speak to a little bit more about the piece of like aligned investors. You have to have your financials together. It has to make sense. You have to be able to explain that, but at the same time, not, mess up the integrity of your own art and your own journey.
Yeah. So in order to find aligned investors, I kind of think of it more like professional development for you, right? It's time when you go, let's say, to get your like 9 to 5 job while you're in the process of building out your company and your vision. Typically, if you're doing a great job, you're gonna like look up like what the company is about, who, because they usually say it on the thread, or you can dig around for it, like who's in charge of this department? Who am I going to be interviewing with? And then just like study that person, know their story. It's better that you kind of do the heavy lifting of like, I'm applying to this grant, I'm sitting with Nina, I'm going to pitch her for investment. Please do your homework on them as well. An interview goes both ways. They're trying to see like, is this going to be a good investment, let's say? And if they're investing in you, it's a long relationship. I'll say that. I always like to joke, it's like it's a marriage. I don't want to be in a bad one. So I need to like kind of assess if it's going to be a good fit. And I have my own personal parameters of what works for me. But like do your homework on someone, figure out what your intentions are, write this down, write this down, write this down. Please write this all down. I have amazing recall too. Write it down. uh, and you should be able to tell me their story, right? So whoever you're sitting with, you should know baseline, like what their career is, where they came from, how they got to where they are. You kind of need to kind of like know what they've said in the news recently, if it's available, or stalk their socials. That'll tell you a thing or two. Truly. And you kind of get a sense of that person. And from there, you can kind of drum up questions to ask. But I think everyone should have what I like to say boilerplate or standard questions that you should ask everyone. You should never go into a conversation not having questions. That's a red flag for me and like everybody. If you don't have questions, oh no, you are ripe to get scammed. Like you are ripe to get scammed. take the time, know who you're meeting with. It actually impresses me every time that I meet someone who did their homework because it makes me happy. I'm like, "Oh, good. They're serious." Like, to me, it signals, "Oh, you're serious." I I'm taking this conversation in a very different tone than if you just were like, "Hey, blah, 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 blah." And then I'm like, "Hi," but and it's happened. She's for anyone listening, I'm like, she's laughing, but it's actually happened where people will like book time on my calendar and not know a thing about. I've had tech founders find me and pitch me some like B2B software, and I'm like, "Babes, where's the creative I like, this is not what I do. You're not gonna convince this is not even in my investment thesis. No. This is not in my zone of genius. Like, I could analyze, but this is not what I wanna do, and I don't care to, like, expand on it. It's gonna be a bad marriage if I enter it with something I don't like. Do your homework, come prepared with questions, and it's always like, yes, it's more work, but you gotta think about it of, like, you are advocating for your career. You wanna be able to defend your vision, and you wanna be able to protect it in many different ways. That is an investment of your time that is always worth it, in my opinion. Please do your homework on people. I cannot emphasize this enough. Do your homework and come with questions. And they can't be like, "Oh, what's your favorite color?" Like, think about the questions. And again, remember from what I said earlier, think like an investor when you have those questions too, because then it sets a very different tone than if you had just called Taylor up.
Wait, who
So,
are you? What are you into?
yep.
You booked the time on my calendar. Excuse me.
You you would be surprised. It happens more frequently than I would like, and it makes me cranky. I will be very polite on the phone, but I trust me, if you do that, if you do that with anybody, it's not a good look. So please, everyone come a little prepared. That's how you find an aligned investor, by being prepared and knowing what you're about to like enter. And then you can meet great people and they'll actually be honest with you and say, like, "I'm sorry, this is not a good opportunity, but I'd love to like support you in other ways." And I think that's still a win.
I love that. And as we kind of begin to wrap up, I would love to hear a little bit more about what legacy means to you. What does it look like to you on both an individual and collective level? Feel free to throw in any of your spiritual philosophies. You have a podcast called it deals with Saturn. So I
Yeah.
would love to hear a little bit about yeah, what legacy means to you.
Legacy means to me is just honoring your authenticity and the authenticities of those before you. And I'm so glad you mentioned Saturn made me do it, because throughout this whole journey, um, I actually purposely have documented everything. So you can like, if you have the time, you can actually like follow like my different processes of things I've tested and failed and like tweaked along the way. And in the beginning and for majority of the year, I actually used like free resources to prove to you all that like you can like make it off of like a very lean budget or no budget. You just need to start, and like you can be on a podcast such as this one talking about what you do, but you need to just start. And it's by showing up and like as your most authentic self. And so with Saturn made me do it, I have to actually get back to that. Thank you for reminding me. It's taken a backseat while the other things have taken priority at the moment. But with Saturn made me do it, it was me kind of talking about like my Saturn return journey for the astrology people. And for the non-astrology folks, it's this period of major personal growth in an astrological lens. It's like growing up astrologically, and people tend to like talk about it as this doom and gloom of like, oh my God, like like lost this job and like my house like I got lit on fire, like all these crazy events that in essence some people do get married, so there's good things in it, or start families. So it's not all doom and gloom, but these big ticket life events that really kind of alter your life trajectory, in my opinion, for the better, even though it doesn't feel like it in the moment. And so by sharing like what I've been going through or how I think and what I feel, I know that someone out there will resonate with it. And I know that for me, observing other people and having them share their stories, it kind of made me think differently about how to approach something or made me believe that, yeah, I could do that too. Like, I don't need to have this cookie cutter mold to like start something or attempt something else. Like, we've talked about it. I used to work as a public servant, and then I worked in finance, and now I'm back in like the arts and culture space that I've always in the background my entire life appreciated and been involved in. But now I've decided to make it my career by honoring the two other journeys during my Saturn return, right? So when I think about legacy, it's really just showing up authentically for yourself. When I think about legacy for the collective, it's just making sure that that authenticity is properly preserved. It serves legacy serves as the blueprint for those who come after you, so they can continue to build on something that you've created from nothing. And I think that's really beautiful. Um, yeah, I'll just stop there.
I love that. I love that. And even what you shared about, seeing Saturn in a different lens. I'm literally in my Saturn return now, like fresh in. And the way I like to feel into it, it's literally like this kind of grandfather energy that is like, listen, like we all know our grandfathers at one point, and when they're like, listen, okay, we love you, but sometimes you got to have a little bit of that structure and discipline energy. And like any places in your life where you're out of alignment, it kind of does that like, if you're like open to the receiving that medicine. If you're over here and your alignment is over here, it does this thing. But it's like, oh, it feels a little spicy and a little juicy, and that's the beauty of it. So definitely putting that energy out there for you to carry that on. And also, since we're on the topic, what is next for you, and how can people really connect with you and your incredible work?
My goodness. Yeah. So what's next for me? I might have briefly touched on the fact that I have our Muse Collective. It has the art gallery. So that's been eating up a lot of my time and it's making me really happy. And so the art gallery is me selecting 13 emerging artists for our inaugural exhibition called Project 2026 America Reincarnated, which is a direct response to Project 2025. And I'm selecting 13 artists that I think beautifully reflect the American identity in a more expansive version than what's being discussed right now in our cultural institutions. And so I'm kind of working on the fact that I actually teach those artists for like 12 weeks. They get put through a curriculum. So I'm teaching them to fish, right, on specifically the art world and the art business and giving them the opportunity to showcase their work here in New York because if you can't afford to live in this city, I don't think that should hinder you. So I'm in the process of still selecting all 13, but in essence, you can be across the United States and your work will be shown here and be on the art fair circuit for 2026. And it's that entire exhibition and these artists are a direct reflection of the heavy themes of legacy that we've been talking about today and the importance of preserving that. So that's what I've been working on right now. You can look for more information by signing up for email updates on ormusecollective.com. I will be, right now, the open call is till September 5th, 2025. So if you're an artist and you would like your work to be platformed in that way, like feel free to submit your work. I always like to say, even when you submit it, you get something out of it. I may not select that person, but you'll notice when you go through the submission, those are actually the pretty standard questions that most galleries will ask you anyway. So you get something out of it. I always encourage people, it's a good exercise to like get familiar with what's expected of you if you decide to go the route of gallery representation. And what's great is that it starts making you think, like I said, start asking questions of those who you want to enter business agreements with, because then they start thinking about, well, what's the is it consignment or is it contract? What is the percentage that the gallery receives? And I'm like, it's exciting for me to actually see that come from people now that they know what's expected, the baseline. So that's what I've been working on now. So I would definitely stay tuned for more updates on that. It's kind of a hybrid model, so you'll see it online, but there's pop-up events throughout New York City, and again, it'll be on the art fair circuit um, across the nation and internationally. So in 2026, that should be very exciting. And as for any other upcoming projects, I think you'll have to stay tuned because my other newsletter, which is more of like the intersection of the financials and funding for creativity, Creativity Meets Capital, has some exciting interviews with the Althea Gibson Foundation, um, for those that don't know, Althea Gibson is the theme for this year's US Open for 75 years of breaking barriers. She was the first Black woman to win a US Open, and she very candidly was just the Serena Williams before Serena ever became the GOAT in the sports world. So, very interesting story. I was a pleasure to interview the estate of Althea Gibson, and when you learn more about her, you'll be inspired that you can quite literally do anything you want in this life. You just need a champion mindset. So that's what I have coming up so far that I can share. And it's been really a pleasure speaking with you today. And I'm so excited to see like what everybody creates, how everyone becomes the founder, and really just appreciate the work that they've built and put out for me and others to enjoy.
So many juicy things. I'm so grateful for your time. This has truly been filled with gems. I know our community is going to be soaking it up. Y'all take notes because this is one you'll have to return to time and time again. So, thank you so much, Nina. And we'll definitely have all her things in the notes so you guys can stay connected. And yeah, we'll see y'all on the next episode. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.